What happens when one of the most beloved actresses in the world sits down for what should be a simple chat about her legendary career, only to face a host who seems determined to tear her down? In just 37 seconds, a single cutting remark about Mary Poppins would transform a pleasant morning show into television chaos and expose the ugly side of daytime TV that viewers rarely see. Julie Andrews walked onto the Loose Women set that Tuesday morning with her trademark grace, wearing a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. The studio audience erupted in warm applause as she settled into the guest chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had that familiar twinkle in her eye, the same one that had charmed audiences for decades in films like The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. "Julie, welcome to Loose Women," said host Denise Welch, though her smile seemed forced from the very beginning. "I have to say, I never quite understood the fuss about Mary Poppins. I mean, it's just a nanny with an umbrella, isn't it?" The studio fell silent. Julie's eyebrows raised slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Well, Denise, I think Mary Poppins represents something much deeper than that. She's about finding magic in everyday life, about the power of imagination to heal and transform families." "Right, but let's be honest," Denise interrupted, leaning forward with a smirk. "It's all a bit silly, isn't it? Talking umbrellas and magic carpet bags? Children today want superheroes, not some prim Victorian woman singing about spoonfuls of sugar." The other panelists shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, clearly trying to lighten the mood, jumped in with, "But Julie, your voice is absolutely incredible. When you sing, it's like listening to an angel." "Thank you, that's very kind," Julie replied graciously, though her voice carried a slight edge now. "I've been fortunate to work with some wonderful composers over the years. The Sherman brothers, who wrote the songs for Mary Poppins, were absolute geniuses at creating melodies that children and adults could enjoy together." "Oh, please," Denise scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Let's not pretend those songs are anything special. My 5-year-old nephew could write better lyrics than supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's just nonsense words strung together." The audience began to murmur, sensing the tension building on stage. Julie's posture straightened, and for the first time, her famous composure showed the slightest crack. "Those nonsense words, as you call them," Julie said, her voice remaining steady but growing firmer, "have brought joy to millions of children around the world for over 60 years. They teach children that language can be playful, that words have power, and that sometimes the most profound truths come wrapped in whimsy." "But don't you think it's a bit irresponsible?" Denise pressed on, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was causing. "Teaching children to expect magic solutions to their problems? The real world doesn't work that way. Kids need to learn that life is hard, not some fairy tale where everything gets fixed with a song and a dance." The camera caught Julie's face as something flickered behind her eyes. The other panelists looked mortified, one actually covering her face with her hands. But Denise seemed energized by the confrontation, leaning back in her chair with satisfaction. "I think," Julie said carefully, "that children face enough harsh realities without adults going out of their way to crush their sense of wonder. Art, music, and stories have always been ways for humans to process difficult emotions and find hope in dark times. When a child sings a spoonful of sugar, they're not avoiding reality. They're learning that joy can coexist with responsibility." "That's exactly the problem, though," Denise shot back, her voice getting louder. "You've made a fortune selling parents this fantasy that they can just sing their way through parenting. Some of us live in the real world, where mortgage payments don't get made with pixie dust." The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable. Someone in the back actually stood up as if to leave. The camera operators seemed unsure where to focus as the tension reached a boiling point. Julie took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried the full weight of her 7 decades of experience in show business. "Denise, I'm not sure what's happened in your life to make you so cynical about joy, but I refuse to apologize for bringing happiness to families. The letters I receive from parents telling me how Mary Poppins helped them through divorce, illness, or loss tell a very different story than the one you're painting." "Oh, spare me the sob stories," Denise snapped, waving her hand dismissively. "Next, you'll be telling us that singing to sick children actually cures cancer." The collective gasp from the audience was audible. Even Denise's fellow panelists looked shocked at how far she had pushed things. Julie's face went pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the arms of her chair. "That," Julie said quietly, "is beneath contempt." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Denise realized she had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down with even more venom. "Beneath contempt? Denise laughed harshly, her face flushing red. That's rich, coming from someone who built her entire career pretending to be perfect. You know what I think? I think you're just another privileged celebrity who's never had to deal with real problems. Julie stood up slowly, her dignity intact despite the chaos swirling around her. I think this conversation has run its course. Oh no, you don't get to play the victim here, Denise said, also rising from her chair. You came on my show, so you'll sit there and take it like everyone else. This isn't some Disney movie where you can just float away with your umbrella when things get uncomfortable. The other panelists were frantically trying to signal the producers off camera. One of them, Linda, finally found her voice. Denise, maybe we should take a break and… No, Denise snapped, turning on her own colleague. I'm sick of everyone tiptoeing around these so-called legends. She's just a person, not royalty. Julie's voice cut through the chaos with crystal clarity. You're absolutely right, Denise. I am just a person who has spent 70 years learning that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty leaves scars that last lifetimes. I've worked with difficult people before, but I've never encountered someone who seemed to take such pleasure in trying to hurt others. Hurt you? Denise screeched, her composure completely gone now. You're the one sitting there acting all superior with your fancy accent and your holier-than-thou attitude. Some of us didn't get handed everything on a silver platter. The audience was getting restless. Someone shouted, "Leave her alone," from the back rows, while others started booing Denise openly. The camera caught Julie's face as she processed what was happening around her, her expression shifting from hurt to something approaching pity. I earned my place in this industry through hard work, just like everyone else, Julie said firmly. I started performing when I was 12 years old to help support my family. I've been rejected, criticized, and knocked down more times than I can count. The difference is, I chose not to let those experiences turn me bitter. Bitter? Denise was practically shrieking now. You don't know what bitter is. You've lived in your Hollywood bubble for decades while the rest of us deal with real life. When was the last time you worried about paying rent or wondering if your kids would have enough to eat? Julie's composure finally cracked, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of anger, her face showed genuine compassion. Denise, whatever pain you're carrying, whatever disappointments you faced, taking it out on guests isn't going to heal those wounds. It's only creating new ones. This seemed to enrage Denise even more. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. You don't know anything about my life or my struggles. Just because you can carry a tune doesn't make you qualified to give life advice. You're right, Julie agreed quietly. I don't know your story, but I do know that hurt people often hurt people. And right now, that's exactly what's happening here. The show's producer finally appeared at the edge of the stage, making cutting motions across his throat. But Denise was beyond caring about professional consequences. You want to know what's really happening here? She snarled. What's happening is that I'm tired of pretending that mediocre performers from a bygone era deserve endless praise just because they're old. Your movies are dated, your songs are cheesy, and your whole sweet grandmother act is probably as fake as everything else in Hollywood. The studio fell dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Julie's face went completely still, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper but somehow filled the entire room. I have children, Denise. Grandchildren, people I love who will see this broadcast and wonder why another human being felt the need to be so deliberately cruel to their grandmother, their mother, their friend. I have to go home tonight and explain to them why someone they've never met decided to attack not just me, but the work that has brought meaning to my life. Denise seemed to realize she had gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Well, maybe your family needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around Julie Andrews. Maybe a little reality check is exactly what they need. That was the moment everything changed. Julie's famous self-control, the grace she had maintained through decades of public life, finally reached its breaking point. But instead of exploding with anger, she did something far more devastating. She became completely, utterly calm. I see, she said, nodding slowly. I understand now. Understand what? Denise demanded, though her voice had lost some of its venom. I understand that this was never about Mary Poppins, or my career, or anything I've done. This is about you needing to tear someone down to make yourself feel bigger. This is about you using your platform to bully someone who came here in good faith, to share stories that might bring people joy. Denise's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around them, the studio had become a pressure cooker of tension and disbelief. You don't know what you're talking about, Denise stammered, but her voice had lost its earlier bite. She looked around desperately at her fellow panelists, seeking support that wasn't coming. I was just trying to have an honest conversation instead of the usual celebrity worship nonsense. Julie shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving Denise's face. No, that's not what this was. An honest conversation would have involved listening to my answers instead of preparing your next attack. An honest conversation wouldn't have included mocking something that brings joy to children or making cruel jokes about serious illness. I never made jokes about illness, Denise protested, though her face was turning an even deeper shade of red. You implied that I was claiming music could cure cancer, Julie replied evenly. You said it with a smirk on your face, as if the idea of bringing comfort to suffering families was somehow amusing to you. The other panelists were now openly staring at Denise in horror. Linda tried once more to intervene. Perhaps we should all take a step back and… No, Denise cut her off again, but this time her voice cracked slightly. She came on here acting like she's better than everyone else with her perfect little stories about spreading joy and magic. Some of us live in the real world, where bills need to be paid and dreams don't come true just because you wish upon a star. Julie's expression softened slightly, and when she spoke, there was genuine sadness in her voice. Oh, Denise, I'm so sorry that life has convinced you that cynicism is the same thing as wisdom. I'm sorry that somewhere along the way, you decided that tearing down beauty was easier than creating it yourself. Stop it, Denise said, her voice getting higher. Stop talking to me like I'm some broken child who needs your pity. I don't pity you, Julie said quietly. I feel sorry for the audience members who tuned in hoping to hear about music and movies and instead had to watch you use your position to bully a guest. I feel sorry for your colleagues who have to sit here wondering if they'll be your next target. And yes, I do feel sorry for you, because this behavior is going to follow you long after I've left this studio. The producer was now standing directly behind the cameras, making increasingly frantic gestures. The audience had begun talking among themselves, some getting up to leave. The whole situation was spiraling completely out of control. Denise looked around wildly, realizing that she was losing not just the argument, but the entire room. In a last desperate attempt to regain control, she played her final card. You know what? She said, standing up and pointing directly at Julie. I think you need to leave. This is my show, and I don't have to sit here and listen to some washed-up actress lecture me about how to do my job. The collective gasp from everyone present was so loud it could probably be heard in the parking lot. Julie's eyes widened in genuine shock, not at being asked to leave, but at the sheer audacity of someone calling her washed up on live television. Excuse me? Julie said, her voice deadly quiet. You heard me, Denise said, though she was clearly shaking now. Pack up your little handbag and your sanctimonious attitude and get out of my studio. We don't need has-been actresses telling us how to behave. The silence that followed was deafening. Julie stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened, while everyone else seemed frozen in disbelief. Then, slowly, she began to gather her things. I want everyone at home to understand something, Julie said, speaking directly to the cameras as she picked up her purse. I came here today to talk about music, about the joy of performance, about the wonderful people I've worked with over the years. Instead, I was subjected to personal attacks, mockery of my work, and finally asked to leave because I had the audacity to suggest that kindness matters more than cruelty. Denise tried to interrupt, but Julie held up her hand. I'm 67 years old, Julie continued, her voice growing stronger. I've been performing for over 5 decades. I've worked with everyone from Walt Disney to Stephen Sondheim to Blake Edwards. I've been honored by the Queen of England and celebrated by audiences around the world. But none of that matters as much as this simple truth. How we treat each other is the only legacy that really counts. She walked toward the exit, then turned back one final time. Denise, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But I hope you find it without having to hurt other people along the way. And with that, Dame Julie Andrews, one of the most beloved entertainers in the world, walked off the Loose Women set with her head held high, leaving behind a host whose career would never fully recover from 37 seconds of pure venom that revealed her true character to millions of horrified viewers. The woman who had taught generations that a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down had just shown that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to participate in it.